shrunk in the post-apartheid era. There was more funding to fight apartheid than now to develop South Africa. And most of these NGOs and CBOs have been co-opted to Sangoko, so that the state channels funding through these NGOs. The organs of civil society have been all co-opted. Most of the leadership have gone into government. And new forms of social movements are emerging. And they are now dubbed as ultra-left. I'm not too sure what is left and what is ultra-left. We have the Anti-Privatization Forum, we have National Association for People Living with AIDS, we have the Landless People's Movement, and many other new social movements emerging. The state has become a poor regulator of the private sector. We find that local economic development hasn't kick-started, and even if NGOs do try to take the initiative, they do not get much support from the state. Now, very quickly, from the Frick spoken about the National Planning and Development Commission, and this is a very recent report, and they concede to the fact that too few people work in South Africa. 25% of South Africans are engaged in the formal labor market, whilst the remaining active labor force are confined to the informal economy. A total of 40% of the population depends on state grants, which means 25% of the population contributes to state grants to help them out of the vulnerability. The standard of education for most black learners is of very poor quality. Infrastructure is poorly located. Spatial patterns exclude the poor from the fruits of development. There's widespread of diseases because of the poor health system. Corruption is widespread. South Africa remains a divided society. Lastly, crime is the biggest plague that scares investors. Now, I'm going to leave a very provocative question. The in-class Business students will debate, can we undo almost 350 decades of exploitation, social exclusion, and development of the majority of the indigenous people in South Africa in just under 19 years? Can we undo that? Thank you.
I'll ask colleagues to come up to the table. I'm going to just make a quick look. Professor Sharma, please. Professor Sharma, please. John. Professor Sharma started off with three things that ran through all of the papers: development, social justice, and somehow empowerment, or lack of empowerment, maybe in human. And these really struck a chord in all the societies with high levels of inequality, greater levels of inactivity, economic inactivity in some countries than others. I mean, the idea that only 25% of South Africans are in the formal labour market, that's a very strong figure. Maybe in India we have about 70% of the population is rural, so that is out of the formal labour market. So I think all our countries are united by the question of the rural condition. All of them are united by the question of high inequalities. And the question of social justice is a question that is really quite central. So I'd like to ask Mikhail to talk a little about the social justice project and the conceptions of social justice in contemporary Russia. I'd like you to talk about some, I think the answer to your question, 350 years in 19, we had a president who did 50 years in 5. But you know, that's a hard one to do. And the thing is that what I noticed in South Africa is that the whites have not opened their hands at anything, except for the poor whites. Yeah? So you have a Californian lifestyle for the very top of the population. And of course what we have identified in many of the papers as a thing which we call a result patrimonialism. That means that people from wealthier classes use the state and state policies for their own benefit and live and ride off the state. So thing with water in use in Yunnan. Certainly the thing you mentioned, the rise in black upper middle class controlling the state. Mikhail, I've read quite a lot about Sumli Ping's work on transition from socialism to capitalism, and it's a very strong element there, both within China and in Russia. This idea of patriotism, certainly, and Professor Sharma raised this question as well, the benefits flowing out of places. So Mikhail's point, of course, about the presence of the state, I'm sure that was absolutely very, very clear, his viewpoint on it. And the big question it leaves me is this our present conception of the state and its functioning, has that somehow outlasted what's possible? Do we have to move into some, I mean, this has probably never been done in the history of the world, in some in a complex society, because we only know state and market. So what are the ways out, or do we have to come back, what kind of state do we have to come back to? Do you see from an Indian perspective, from a Russian perspective, in India, of course, the state is very present everywhere. The university systems, and it's everywhere, but it's an inefficient state we see it as. But it's probably very efficient in some areas. In China, the state is extraordinarily efficient, but what's the problem? Many people say they don't care, which is what you were saying. They've got the idea of equilibrium, which is right within their idea, the harmonious growth, but they don't care. And then we've got South Africa, post-apartheid state, and we hear all the, I mean, South Africa, we do read quite a lot in the newspapers. How do you see the evolution of the South African state? Because every South African sociologist all talks very differently to Chinese and to Brazilian, because they're always talking about the market. We talk a little bit about it, but not like the South Africans. So they're just some disconnected questions, but they all connect somewhere because we have some common agendas that now arise in this afternoon's discussion, this evening's discussion. So I'll hand the microphone over to Gustav.
Thanks. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to make some comments because this is the second session of the first thing. It was very fascinating to see the many similarities and the many differences too. Somehow I think that many of the issues here revolved around state formation and nation building. And of course the processes are very different. For instance, when Sultan was showing the South African map, if we look at Brazil, and if we look at India too, what is at stake here is the products of colonialism. And both Brazil, India, and South Africa entered the capitalist world system, whereas the, I'm talking about the capitalist world system today.
South Africa.
He's over there.
He's over there.
Where?
He's over there, on the corner.
We're talking about him.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Entered because the Wallensteinian concept is also a historical concept. So the three different nation states today entered the world system in different ways under different European powers. The UK, it's the case of India, Netherlands, and the UK, and South Africa, and Portugal, and in different moments and so forth, what raises the discussion about post-colonialism, etc., but also raises the discussion about imperialism. And that's where we shift to Russia and China. So it's like the BRICS, we have three products of colonialism that are different colonial products, and we have two imperial powers, Russia and China, very strong expanding states and with different minority issues that result from there. And especially, it's when you look at China and Russia, they're superpowers, right? Nuclear weapons, nuclear arsenal, and India also has nuclear power. So I think that all of these issues, I'm just raising a few, let's say, mega issues that are also important to consider the difference in development and in state power among the BRICS. And also what struck me is that when it comes to, at least currently, because you're right that integration is also a problem. Like what Siberia is for Russia, Amazonia is for Brazil, right? But currently what we saw in our papers is that classic developmentalism is alive and well everywhere in the BRICS. After the '92 environmental reform, which has a lot to do with your paper, it looks like the sustainable development jargon is fading away on the horizon, and well, in Brazil, it's a little bit like this at this moment. It's a very developmentalist government. Dams, roads, and the old hard stuff of old World Bank 1970 kind of engineering large-scale projects. So, as I said, it's not that I wanted to make a question, but I just wanted to put more issues on the floor. And thanks for your presentation.
Take some questions. Today's.
Mark, would you like to come here?